Right. Okay. So the roadmap for today, what is mental health? I was reflecting this afternoon and thinking, oh, wow. Um, Many times I've spoken at maybe other people's events, I've spoken online, I've spoken corporately, and I sort of talk about what is mental health. But I was reflecting and thinking it's been a long, long time since we actually talked about what is mental health when we have these hubs. It's important to talk about it because that's really one of the things, that's one of our themes. So we're going to talk about why is young adult mental health very important? Because if you look at all the research is saying, what all the statistics is saying, there is a need for the world to pay attention to what's happening regarding the mental health of our young people. There is no single doubt about it. And I'm going to share very large, convincing, gripping data that will make people reflect in terms of not just people who are parents or coaches or mentors, but people who are also policymakers, people who shape the direction of policies and direction of our the direction of flow of resources. Because the reality is that if there's any time to pay attention to the mental health of young people, it is now, and it's across the world. It's not just in developed nations of the world. Of course, there's a difference which we are going to come to, but the reality is that it's now to do that because the evidence shows that we do need to take action now. So we're going to look at students and youth, young adult suicide as well. Sadly, these things happen. They are regrettable, and hopefully these are part of the events that will help us to prevent them. And then how can parents support their young adults? That's something I hear over and over again. So I thought it's nice to be able to have this conversation with parents like once a week or maybe twice a week. So why don't we just all come together and share some of the thoughts that we share on those private calls? Um, and then how can communities support? And then there are a few tools also that people can sort of use. So what is mental health? Mental health is an enigma. Very often in our communities, I hear people say, oh, that person has mental health. Just be careful. They have mental health. And sometimes it just brings a grin to my face in a way because I'm thinking everybody has mental health. Just like we all have physical health, we also have mental health. So mental health is not a stigma thing. Mental health is actually a state of well-being where everyone is able to fulfill their potential. They are able to show up every day to deal with all the ups and downs of life. But not only so, to be able to work effectively and to contribute to community, to deliver on our social responsibilities, to be a responsible dad, to be a responsible mom, to be a responsible son or daughter, a responsible CEO, teacher, pastor, um, whatever line of work we're in. That's what mental health really is about. It's about the ability to be, we're in a state of mind, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we act is such that even when life is difficult, when there are ups and downs, we are still in a position to be able to deliver on our responsibilities and to maximize our potential. That's really what mental health is about. And often um, people mental can be an invisible disability or it can be this invisible handicap. And the reason is because if somebody has a heart attack, we know where to check. We know that what's happened is that their heart has had the vessels taking blood to their heart has been blocked, and as a result, the heart muscle has died, and the heart is not functioning well, and all the other systems that are associated with the heart, which is all the systems of the body, have been affected. When somebody has a stroke, we know what's happened is that either a vessel in their brain has been clogged, blocked, or it has ruptured. As a result of that, some part of the brain has been affected in terms of some part of the brain tissue may have died temporarily or permanently, and that's having effect on the function of that area of the brain, and it has an impact on the body. It's very simple. If somebody has a fracture, we know that their bone is broken, and most times we put a plaster there and it sets the bone. The challenge is that when somebody has a mental health problem, where do we look? The place to look is the area of thinking, the area of feeling, and the area of behavior, because those three are interlinked. Our thinking would affect our feelings, our emotions, and our emotions will in turn affect our behavior. And that's what mental really is. People say, oh, yeah, we can't see it, but we can see it in the way people behave. We can see it in the way people think by the way they talk. We can see it in also the emotions that people display. So that's really, and when does mental become a problem? Because that's the other thing I hear often. Mental health and mental illness is interchangeably used in our communities. In fact, today, right on LinkedIn, I was reading a post and I thought, oh, wow, even somebody who's quite very eminent is interchangeably using this, when in actual sense, they are two different things. Mental health is what I've described. It can be variable. That's when it's good, that's a state of well-being where you can do all the things I talked about. But mental illness also occurs, and mental can be variable. It can vary from one end to the other. The reason why I'm going into all these basics this evening is because if we start talking about the mental of our young adults and our students, we need to know what we are talking about. We know who young adults are, or at least we assume we do, because I'm also going to share some thoughts about young adults that might surprise you. Anyway, going back to mental illness. So when there are now changes in the way we think, we feel, or behave, such that it affects the way we show up at work, the way we show up with our families, the way we show up in society, such that maybe we start avoiding text messages, we stop interacting with people, we start canceling on appointments, we start calling in sick, all of those things, maybe because of sadness, maybe because of anxiety, maybe because of even more severe things, suicidal thinking, all of those things, or difficulty with sleeping or disturbed appetite. When all of those things are happening and they begin to affect the way we show up, that's when it becomes mental illness, because it is now creating problem in the way of functioning in the social life, in work environment, and the family. That's when it then becomes an issue, and that's when it does need to be addressed. So I hope that we are all on the same page regarding that. So we know what mental health is now, and we know that it differs from mental illness. There's a difference between the two, and it's important to really make that distinction. The £1 million question or $1 million question is this: what causes mental problems? What causes mental illness? And there's no single thing. There's no single thing that actually causes mental problems or mental illness. It's a combination of factors, and because at Tripart Care, we try to make things as simple as possible. So we've adopted the 4N approach. It's N, so it's just 4 N's. If you can remember 4 N's, then you are able to remember what. And it's nature, nurture, negative or positive life events, and narcotics. Just to break that down quickly: nature, genetics, the fact that when somebody has a close relative, maybe a parent or a brother or sister that has a mental problem, one might be at increased risk. However, I like the way Dr. Daniel Amen, very leading global public health psychiatrist and very leading name in psychiatry, he says that genetics, your gene loads the gun, but it's stress that pulls the trigger. And I'm going to say that again because it's really important, because it's actually, that statement is loaded with hope. He says genes load the gun, but stress pulls the trigger. The reality, what he was trying to say is this: that the fact that somebody inherits certain genes, maybe a parent has depression or even bipolar illness or psychosis or any of the mental conditions or anxiety, does not necessarily sentence that person that certainly they are going to have it, because the reality is that it's combination of stress and other factors that will then tip that person over. So the import of that is it's not something to resign to and say, oh yeah, because I've got the genes, inevitably it's going to happen. So there are things that can be done. The other one, in terms of nature, apart from the genes that people inherit, that we inherit, is also temperament. So we do know that people who are lacking in confidence, who tend to process things inwardly, who tend to have few friends, who tend to have no confidence, are more at risk. Because the reality is that when we process things in our minds by ourselves alone, particularly problems, particularly challenges, molehills can become mountains. So we do know that those are things that we know in terms of nature. In terms of nurture, it's certainly about how we were raised. No two ways about it. I'm sure there are lots of my colleagues who are on the platform. For those who are not in the know, there's what is called childhood adverse experiences or childhood adversity, where any child experiences physical, sexual, or emotional abuse of any sort or neglect. All of those increase they significantly increase their risk of mental problems in the future. And that's why every leader on this group, everyone who is a parent, needs to be aware of our responsibility that every time we interact with children, we are actually writing a code for their mental health for the future. That's what we are doing. And it's, but even the people that we interact with, the way we lead people, it's really important to bear that in mind, that's really what we are doing. So childhood experiences, adverse childhood experiences increase when somebody has had more than 4 of them. It increases the risk. It remarkably increases the risk of not only mental problems or physical problems, and it's also been associated to reduce life expectancy by up to 20 years. All the adverse childhood experiences, if they can be avoided, they are best avoided. And just thinking about that as well, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is quite a leading name in trauma and has been studying trauma since the Vietnamese wars in the 60s and very, very late in the 60s, early in the 70s, says that the most important or the most profound mental health intervention known to mankind is the interaction between a parent and their child. That's also to emphasize that the parent-child interaction is a very important one. It's really key. And I'm emphasizing that to lay a background for when we come to, when we start talking about our young adults, because of certain things that I've observed, certain things that we see in literature about the interaction between our young adults and some of our parents. So that's nurture. Negative or positive life events is really about it's not just negative life events. People think that it's only when things go wrong that people can become unwell. Even some positive things, for instance, having a new baby, and that's relating to young adults. Sometimes we think, oh yeah, he's an adult now, he's married, he's got a child, he's okay, he's hunky-dory. However, what we do know is that 10%, we know about postnatal depression among women, but what we also do know is that 10% of men suffer from postnatal depression, particularly when it's their first child. That's not something that people like to talk about. That's not something that men like to talk about either, because it feels like, what's the big deal? Are you the first man to have a child, sort of thing? However, the reality is that these things happen, and it's important to be aware of them. So it's not just negative life events. It's about getting a raise. It's about getting a promotion. It's about starting a business. It's about starting a piece of work. It's about starting a project. It's about starting a charity. All of the things that put pressure on our usual resources and the impact that those can then have on the way we show up and on the way our mood is, on the way we think, we feel, and that we behave. Bereavement, divorce, separation, domestic violence, all of those things can have impact. And of course, particularly relevant to our young adults and our students is also narcotics, illicit substances. These days, the streets are awash with them. And of course, there's also what's now called novel psychoactive substances, where they are more potent and they've been manufactured in the lab. So they are really it's really like illicit substances at its highest form, and all of those things. And of course, we do know that alcohol use is also can be detrimental to mental health. The other thing we do know is that alcohol use and illicit substance use may actually be a sign of underlying mental conditions. So sometimes when people use these substances, it's actually something, they're actually telling us something is wrong. So good. So now let's begin to get into the nitty-gritty of our theme population today, our young adults. And when we talk about young adults, most people now, it's a bit of a flexible definition, but most people in most communities, in most definitions, will look at people who are, it's after the period of adolescence. So 18 seems to be the common cutoff. However, some people end at 34, 35. Other people go on to 40. Now, this is the interesting thing. Everybody assumes that when somebody turns 18, they're adults. But that is for administrative purposes. It's for tax, it's for the NHS, it's for administering population and managing population. Because we do know that in neuroscience, and this is something we now are very clear about, that the brain continues to develop up until the mid and late 20s. And what's even more interesting is this. Not only does the brain continue to develop into the mid and the late, to sometimes actually the latter part of the 20s as well. What we also do know is that it's the frontal part of the brain, which is like the CEO, the chief executive of the brain, that develops last. That's the area that controls decision making. That's the area that controls impulse control, where when somebody crosses you on the road, why you don't swear at them, why you don't cross them back, or why you don't give them a good chase. It's those parts of our brains that sort of puts the pedal on things and holds us back. It's the rational part of our brain. It's the part of our brain that is involved in problem solving. So with all of that in picture, you can see why what we sometimes call youthful exuberances, why sometimes we can understand where they're coming from. That the most executive part of the brain actually tends to be the part that will then come into its own as we go from our adolescence into our 20s. It's also the part that is responsible for focused attention. So you can, I'm sure that some people who have teenagers in their homes or who have young adults in their homes, I'm hoping that some pennies are beginning to drop. Why you think this is rocket science, but to the young person, it doesn't look like rocket science because their brains are still in the process of doing that development. The other thing is that's when we develop our identity. That's when a lot of people, young people, leave home. Maybe they go to university, they become independent, they start getting into intimacy. And all of those things put a task on the emotional life. They put a task on the emotions, they put a task on the brain because they are all new territories. And you can see why the mental health of young adults is something to think about and to pay attention to now with all of these changes taking place. And I'm sure that people who are looking at me and thinking, oh, big deal. That happened in my own generation. That happened when I was in my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation. It was the same thing. The only difference is this: there's a lot that has changed since our grandparents' generation, our parents' generation, and now our own generation, and the generation of the people that are coming after us. There is a lot that has changed, and uh, we are so there's a lot that has changed, and we know that lots of particularly social support. And I'm going to go into all of that very soon. But the other thing to bear in mind as we think about the mental health of our young adults is this. The World Health Organization tells us that 50% of mental illnesses would have developed by the age of 14. So people start, when you start seeing somebody in their 30s, 40s, 50s, usually most mental conditions would have their 50% by 14. And by the mid 20s, 3 out of 4 would have developed, and 75%, sorry, that's not meant to be, yes. So the final part of that the final line is meant to be 10% of school children also have a diagnosable mental condition. So we can see why it's important. So now the question to think about is this. So where do we go for what's the most informative or the most authoritative data that we have on the mental health of young people across the globe? And there is no other place to turn than the Mental State of the World Global Mind Project. This has been going on since the mid-2020s, mid-2020, just right at the middle of COVID. And the reason why they are the ones to turn to is because currently they've on that database, which is an online survey across over 90 nations of the world, they've got 2 million people, and that data keeps growing, about 2,000 every 2,000 more respondents every day. So that's really large data. And interestingly, and it's been interpreted into 21 languages. So really quite a lot there. They've done a lot of work to try and give us, it's almost like a snapshot of what's the mental state of the world at the moment, and what did they find regarding young adults. And this is where we really need to listen. This is where it's important. This is what's driving all this. What's driving today's dedication of the hub to young adults' mental health. What they found is this, that over the past decade, or maybe between the last 20 and between the last about 15 years, what's happened is that there has been a reversal of the mental trend in the globe, across the world. Traditionally, what happens is that people who are young have very good mental health, and people who are elderly, who are older adults, have very good mental health, and that in middle age, mental health tends to be poor. That's just the general trend, and so it's a U-shaped curve. However, in the last 10 years, that U-shaped curve has become a straight line of the curve, where the people with the poorest mental health are the youngest people, particularly the young adults, and the people with the people with better mental health. As you go up the generation, mental health improves. That's concerning. The reason why it's concerning is this. Currently, we have middle-aged people and maybe older adults who are in the working population. Remember that the meaning of mental health, the part of the definitions of mental health, is that we can work productively. The impact that mental difficulties is having upon young adults now is one that creates concern for when the people who are currently working in their middle age begin to retire. And that's something that's currently being debated in terms of, so really the mental health of young adults is something that really it generates concern, it generates global concern. The interesting thing is that it's across the globe. Everywhere, no matter what continent. And what's also interesting, you would expect that in the advanced nations of the world, in developed nations of the world, where there's so much, where the per capita income that is spent on mental health is higher than in the low and medium income countries of the world, you would expect that the mental health of young adults in those nations will be better than in the places where there's not a lot being spent on mental health. However, the converse is the story. What's actually happening is that the richer nations appear to have youth and young adults who have poorer mental health than people who live in the sub-Saharan. Topping that list in, there's no need to name countries, but that's what we know. And the other thing we do know is that there was a decline peri-COVID. There was a decline in mental health generally across the globe. For the middle-aged people, particularly people 55, appears to be the cutoff, appear to be doing really well post-COVID. But it looks like the young adults are still quite struggling. In fact, what the evidence is showing is that there little or no recovery has been made since the peri-COVID picture. and lots of some of the figures on these slides will show you what's really happening. Depression and anxiety, particularly rising among that age group. And then some new symptoms like feeling detached from reality, anxiety, mood problems, suicidal thinking. All of those are beginning to escalate and warrant concern. So the question that the Sapiens Lab, the Global Mind Project, tried to answer over the last 5 years since they've been doing this is this, that what are the root causes? And they found out that it's not just one cause, that there are multiple causes, but they also interact in a complex way, such that it's almost like there's a complex interaction between the different features. And what did they find? One, the impact of technology, smartphones. Let's remember that the people who are young adults now are the ones who came out of their mother's womb holding their mobile phones in their hands. They were the ones that they never knew anything other than mobile phones, other than iPhones, other than tablets. They were born into it. They from the time they were born, they came holding their mobile phones, so to say, colloquially. So, and what we now know is that there is a very strong link between early exposure to mobile phone, particularly possession of mobile phone. People who have a mobile phone or access to a mobile phone and a personal mobile phone by the age of 6 are up to three times more likely to develop a mental condition than somebody who doesn't. So it's not, this mobile phone thing is not just a myth, or it's not just things that people are petting around. There is some data to it. We also do know that in terms of exposure, particularly to social media, that the impact that it's having on females is worse than males. Anxiety, depression, body image body image problems, mood, aggression, and particularly suicidal behavior. That impact is more escalated in ladies, in young ladies than young men. What are the other risk factors or the other things that they feel it explains this sudden decline in the mentals of young people? Social disconnected cultures, where people, the social support that has been in place before, where we talk about a village raising a child, is no longer in place. The other thing is that there's also a change of culture. There's now more emphasis. There's a performance-driven culture where there's more emphasis on individual performance, on individual achievement at the expense of building relationships. Also, people are paying more emphasis on building online relationships, whereas there are no face-to-face relationships. And the reality is that most times when the crunch is down, it's not your 2,000 followers on Twitter or Facebook that would really be there. It's the people that we've built relationships with face to face. Most times, I'm not saying that online communities are not good. This is an online community, for instance, and I'm hoping that when the crunch is down, that we are there for those who belong to this community. I'm really hoping that. And if we are not doing that enough, I'm hoping that we can continue to improve on that. But I do have a feeling from the feedback I get that the team is doing a brilliant job. Right. So the other thing, erosion of family structures, exposure to ultra-processed food, environmental pollution, pesticides, heavy metals, microplastics. All of those things have an impact on the growing brain. Let's remember that the brain is still continuing to grow to the mid-20s, and sometimes even beyond that. Now, when we think about the impact that those are having on the body and the mind of young people whose brains are still growing, we can begin to see some of the things, some of the factors that are conniving to make things the way they are. So really, there is a lot going on there. There's also loneliness, individualism. All of those things are conniving together to make life quite to create the picture that we are seeing now. So what are the other things that that study, that ongoing study actually shows, the Global Mind Project, and it's online. If you Google the Global Mind Project, it's all there 2021, 2022, 2023. The last one is February 2025, which was reflecting the picture of 2024 because it's usually retrospectively. What it also shows is that our young adults these days tend to have less close friendships who can be there for them when the chips are down. There are rising levels of parental neglect and abuse. And let's remember that we said that childhood adversity is quite a high risk factor for mental conditions in the future. And the impact that that's having is that even when you compare some young adults with the older middle-aged adults, in terms of social interaction, social relationships, self-control, and impulsivity. Some of them discuss that some of the young adults, on the average, there's a 4 to 7-fold impairment in terms of when you compare young adults to middle-aged adults. And of course, there's also the fact that one is 3 times more likely to be distressed or struggling with their mental health if one regularly consumes ultra-processed foods. So the KFCs, the McDonald's, the Pizza Express, and also the stimulant drinks that is really very popular among our young adults. They think, oh, it gives me energy, it gives me a buzz, but it also does not let them sleep at night. It's also nicotine, it's also putting them on overdrive. It also worsens anxiety. All of those things sometimes they are not always aware of it. Right. Beginning to round up now. Right. So what do we know about student mental health in terms of we've not got to the suicide slide yet. We are talking about mental health among students now. Interestingly, the data shows that if somebody is in education, in higher education, their mental health is likely to be better than a young adult who is not in any form of vocation. And that stands to reason because we do know that when people have a sense of purpose, when they have something that they are dedicating their minds and their energies to, they are more likely to be fulfilled in that way. But thinking about the students' mental health, there was a survey carried out, and one of them, most of these figures are from the common the common library of they are from the House of Commons library, House of Commons library, and that's from the February 2025 publication. But what it does show is that generally there's a picture that even students' mental health is poor. Even though when you compare it to the general population of young adults, students fare better. For students, it's about moving away from home. Students who live at home or who live with a relative fare better than people that are still looking back to social support, academic and financial pressures. Students from disadvantaged backgrounds, international students, mature students, students with neurodiversity, all of those are more at risk. Or students who come into university with either a history of physical health conditions, chronic physical conditions, or prior mental conditions are more likely. So for students who might be listening, or for young adults who might be listening, what are the things to think about? Practice self-care. Diet, we've talked about a lot about the things that ultra-processed foods is bad news. Eating healthy is a very important thing. There's such a strong link between our tummy, our gut, and our brain. And brain health starts from gut health. So if we need to be mindful about the things that go through our mouth. Exercise, there's overwhelming evidence that people, when we move our bodies, when our body juggles, our brain is happy. So when our body moves, our brain grooves. When our body moves, our brain grooves. So when our body moves, our brain is happy. And that's also, there's lots of research showing that. Ecotherapy, there's now mounting evidence as well that if we spend lots and lots and lots of time on our phones, we are not likely to engage with nature. And there's a therapeutic and healing aspect of nature as well, particularly to do with relaxation, to do with dealing with mood problems and all of that. Journaling, gratitude, all of those are proven to be of benefit. And then seeking support early, remaining connected. It's good to connect electronically, virtually, but not to neglect face-to-face connections. And importantly, sleep, 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 sleep. I remember a while back I was giving a seminar, and I said, I read a piece of data that showed that 40 that on the overall, that an average teenager sends 40 text messages, WhatsApp messages after bedtime. It was to young people, and a lot of them looked at me and it was like, duh, 40? We thought it would be like 80. And I'm like, what? So really, it just tells us the impact that sometimes technology can have. And of course, poor sleep is bad news perpetually poor sleep is bad news for the brain. Avoiding intoxicants, that cannot be overemphasized. Really avoiding intoxicants cannot be overemphasized. So just this slide, basically what this is saying is that progressively, it looks like that there are certain groups of students who are more at risk, undergraduates more than postgraduates. The average age appears to be 24. It's been rising over the last 5 years or so, 22, 23, and now 24. And there are lower rates on the overall among Black and Asian students, ethnic groups, compared to white and other ethnic groups. Interestingly, the general population where there is the reflection of the general population where there is more male suicide than female suicide is also reflected among young adults. In the general population is 3 to 1. For every 3 males, there's 1 female. In the student population is 2.5 to 1. So it's nearly the same, really. That's it's just about young men. I say, and that's part of the things that communities can do. There's lots and lots of projects, of systems, of support structures that are in place for young women, but not as much for young men. And this is not being sexist or anything like that. It's the reality that we tend to feel that the young men are okay. But from what I see of them, from the interactions I have with young adults who are males, I know that a lot of them are really looking for help. And it's important for community to be attentive to that, for people who are policymakers, for people who run organizations to be aware of that. Coaching, mentoring, all of those things are important. So what can parents do? Rebuilding trust. I've said rebuilding trust because most young people that I speak to, when there are issues, I'm not saying all of them, a lot of times there's a divide. There is a generational divide with their parents. They feel alienated. They feel not understood. They feel judged. So listening in a non-judgmental way is very important. Exploring what matters to them. And I want to say that some of these thoughts that I'm sharing today have actually been shaped by one of my LinkedIn contacts, Dr. Eric Azubi, who practices in Montana and is an eminent child and adolescent psychiatrist. Some of these thoughts, some of them are mine, some of them are some of the things that I've seen him write about, and particularly from his own clinical practice, some of them from my own clinical and community practice as well. So rebuilding trust is a very important thing. Sharing power, giving power back to the young people, but also modeling mental health hygiene. They are the things that we eat, the things that we do, the way we manage our own mental health is actually sending a message to our young people, encouraging them to seek help, but supporting them in a way that doesn't feel we are driving them. Managing our own emotions. Somebody also said that one of the greatest gifts that we can give to the next generation is the gift of our own mental health. One of the greatest gifts that we can give to the next generation is the gift of our mental health, because young people as well, they are still looking for role models. And not comparing or criticizing them, not blaming or threatening them. All of those things sometimes can be cultural. It just comes with the pack. But unfortunately, we also know that they're detrimental, particularly for somebody who already has challenges with their mental health. It's about acknowledging their distress and not invalidating their emotions or feelings, not trivializing it and making them know that it's important, but also educating ourselves. Those are the things that parents can do. Those are the things that leaders can do. For people, for the young adults who may be here, I hope some of the young adults are here. What can you do to help yourself? We've talked about exercise, developing hobbies, journaling, keeping a gratitude journal. All of those have their evidences that back them up in terms of mental well-being. Seeking help as well. It's strength actually to seek help, to seek professional help. It's not the sign that you are broken or anything like that. Every human being needs help at some point in their lives. There's no man who is an island. But also in terms of mastering, what is it that, how do you regulate your own emotions? What are for some people it's breathing exercises. I think that for breathing exercises, we've got a video on the Tripart Care Emotional Wellbeing Hub channel, the YouTube channel on anxiety, managing anxiety. I think we've got, or the one on trauma. Both of them have things on breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, music, arts, being creative, volunteering, drama, all of those things, being able to take your mind into a space that's not focused on yourself, are things that have been of benefit. Quality time with parents, quality time with other people, quality time with friends, not just online, but also monitoring time that is spent online. Ecotherapy, like I said earlier, um, and even meditation has been known. And usually I do say that the meditation that I engage in is scriptural meditation, and that works really very much for me. So emotional, that's all the same. And the other thing is that focus on the things that you can control. Sometimes young adults, I hear a lot of young adults who are worried about what the future might hold, what the past has been, but let's be mindful about what's happening here and now, and celebrate the little joys of life, because we do know that those things, they help us to go through those difficult periods and to emerge on the other side. This is a very good exercise to do with our young adults in terms of the locus and the circle of control. What is it that is within my control? What's the next thing I can do about it? What's outside my control that I don't need to worry about? Because whether I worry about it or not, I can only change what I can change. What's within my control and what's outside my control. So this is 12 evidence-based mental health tips for students and young adults. I think some of them I've talked about already, but I thought I'll put them all together in one slide. I've put get professional help if needed in capitals, in red. So I remember to talk about it because it's really important. Taking responsibility for mental health, that yes, my mental health is not something that is happening to me. Yes, there's stress in the world. In all honesty, I think the people who are living in this, the Gen Zs and the millennials, are dealing with a more difficult society than I grew up in. There's no doubt about that. So I think we need to give that, we need to acknowledge that as people who are leaders, who are parents. I think it's important to acknowledge that. However, it's still important to help young people to sit back, to gain back control and say, despite all of that, I'm still in the driver's seat. I'm still my mental health is still my responsibility in a lot of ways. So avoiding intoxicants, we talked about that, prioritizing sleep and healthy diet, monitoring screen time. There is Google as a link. I think it's www.google/reflect. 5 questions, just 5 simple questions, and it will give you a tailor-made response to whether your screen time is healthy or not, and what you can do about it. And that's one of the resources that is at the end of this slide. And we've talked about knowing how to manage your own emotions, developing your own interests. And the other one is taking a personality test. If there was something I wish I'd done earlier, much earlier in my adult life, one of them would be to have taken a personality test earlier. And there are quite a number there are some of them that we've shared on the resource slide that is at the end of the presentation. Because it's important that you know yourself. Self-awareness is one of the key factors to actually managing your mental health, to managing your emotions. You know what aggravates you. You know what excites you. You know when you know yourself better, you actually are able to manage your mental health better. And then seeking support. It's okay to subscribe to mentoring. It's okay to subscribe to coaching. So I think that's the last formal slide, I believe, or maybe the second to the last. So those are a plethora of Every Mind Matters, brilliant website. It was my delight and pleasure to be involved in one of the Every Mind Matters campaign. I think it was in 2022 or 2021, as we were just coming out of the lockdown. It was a message to the Black community, and that was a privilege that I had, and it's still something I value and cherish. Every Mind Matters is full of practical, actionable steps that young people and everyone can take in terms of managing their mental health. Young minds is specifically for young people. Students' minds is specifically for students. That's the website I talked about, wellbeing.google/reflect. Just 5 simple questions. It takes less than 2 minutes, and they will give you a tailor-made response about whether your screen time is healthy and what you can do about it. Really brilliant resource. Much effort put into it by Google. Apps that you can use, SafeSpot. It's an app. I think it's for people who may be having suicidal thinking. And Freud has lots of care tools for. There's lots of things out there. Papyrus UK, they are really about preventing young people's suicide. And they've got lots of things there. Samaritan, 116123, shout. If you text shout to 85258, these are all resources that people can access when they're in distress. And so that's also talking about the Google one. And these are apps that you can install on your phone to really monitor. I think a couple of years ago, I deleted some social media apps from my phone, and I have no regrets. It freed my time, and I started spending time on the social media platforms that was beneficial, not only for my mental health, but also for my professional development. Sometimes we've got to do some very drastic things in order to claw back time, claw back our sanity, claw back, because when we claw back our time, we're actually investing into our mental health as well. So now we're rounding up. These are the future Tripart Care Emotional Wellbeing updates. 30th, because we've now crossed into Black History Month, so identity is what we are going to take on the last day of the month. I'm looking forward to that. Emotional intelligence in November, and we are not going to have any event in January. It's good to relax and just we're not having any event in December. We'll just chill out and enjoy Christmas, and then we'll come back with a bang in January, 29th January. January is the best month of the year. And those who know, overcoming toxic thinking is what we are going to start on. We are going to deal with. So quite a lot of things, relationships and mental health in February, and arts of self-care in April, trauma-informed care again, and menopause and mental health. I'm quite looking forward to that. I will not be doing that. We're going to get somebody who is qualified to speak on menopause and mental health to come and do that. So these are the things that Tripart Care does. Just the other things that we do. Keynote public speaking. We've got eminent speakers in our team, people who can hold audiences and really deliver. And trust me, so even if I cannot do the public speaking, there are people in the team who I would recommend without any reservations. We also help to train charities, churches, to offer training in terms of mental health. And those are the sort of suite of courses that we offer: burnout prevention, depression, suicide, handling toxic relationships, emotional intelligence. And those are the things that are coming, particularly church and charity leaders mental training series. That's going to be in November. And I think, if I remember, the theme is on emotional intelligence. Okay. We've got a book club. The book club meets every third Thursday of the month, and the next one is going to be 20th of November, 7 to 8 p.m., eminently led by Dr. Docas, who is doing a brilliant job. We are currently looking at the book, The Body Keeps Its Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. That is a trauma classic. And that's our That's our Instagram page. So if you click on that, it will take you to our Instagram page. Lots of activity on the Instagram page. Covenant Fashioner, our social media guru, is doing a great job. And that's our WhatsApp link. Just click on that. It will take you to the WhatsApp link. And that's the generic WhatsApp link for anyone who wants to discuss anything mental health. It's also a support place. It's also lots of, we're able to signpost people confidentially. And that's for leaders, people who are leaders in the marketplace, in the in churches, in charities. That's the link for those. So the conversations that take place in that second WhatsApp group is different because it's about leadership, it's about taking care of ourselves and taking care of other people. That's the link, the WhatsApp link for the book club. If you click on that, you'll be accepted on the book club and you'll be notified, because that means that you're aware of what's happening. And finally, that's the final slide, I believe. Thank you for listening. Those are contact details. That's our Tripart Care YouTube link. I'm sure that one of my co-hosts will put up the link so that you can click on it. And if you click on it and you subscribe, it means that every time we upload videos, it's not just these videos that go on there. We also do some short videos that also go on there. Some short videos that we put on Instagram also go on our YouTube channel. So, and those are the place that I hang out the most these days is on LinkedIn. That's where I found a home. Yeah, and that's the Tripart Care address. And I'm ready to take questions. Thank you very much for listening. I know that was quite a whistle-stop tour. And I can see I'm going to stop sharing now. And I will then look at the comments. So thank you for staying with us. That's not something we take for granted. So thank you for really staying with us. Now